I think we should go back in time a little bit before the Belt and Road Initiative was launched and go back to a number of studies that have been produced from the early 2000s about the need for infrastructure in Asia. In the rapidly growing Asian region, the needs for infrastructure are huge, and it ranges from electricity, energy, infrastructure, roads, ports, and telecommunications. And there have been various studies done, and the latest one suggests that the total amount of financing that's needed is about $26 trillion by 2030. And that includes the whole Asian region, of course, and includes things as different, the ranges from big power stations to rural electrification. It's ports and highways down to smaller farm-to-market roads. So it's an awful lot of infrastructure that's involved here. Well, one of the main positive effects is to facilitate trade and make sure the trade flows much easier. If you have better infrastructure, you have shorter transportation routes perhaps, that would bring down the transportation costs and hopefully then contribute to increased trade. And then the effects on trade on individual countries would be, of course, economic growth at the end of the day. And the estimates now seem to be around $1 trillion in total. But since this is a bit of a project that seems to be expanding, more countries are joining, more projects can be included. I'm not sure that we can put a final number on it, what it would mean at the end of the day. I think the latest figure I've seen is some $64 billion. That's the amount of projects that have been signed so far. So it is an enormous undertaking to finance this. They set up the Silk Road Fund, which is an investment fund, but that one is in turn financed by state-owned banks. But that fund is exclusively set up to finance these projects. And China also initiated the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Back in 2015 it was set up, and as the name suggests, it's the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. That differentiates it from the other multilateral banks that are active in this region in that it would only focus on infrastructure projects. The other banks, they finance a number of other projects as well. So it has a narrow mandate, and it also is the first multilateral development bank that has been launched by a non-OECD country. And it's also slightly different from the other ones in that 75% of the members and the voting rights should belong to regional member countries, which means that it is the Asian countries that are members of the bank that are the ones who have the decision-making power in the bank. So in that sense, it's a different bank. It's slightly different in its governance structure than the other banks. And it's also a large bank financially, because they have a capital base of $100 billion, which is larger than the other multilateral development banks have. So it's a large bank, it's a new bank, and it has the specific emphasis on infrastructure finance. And so far, it's a Chinese initiative, it's Chinese state-owned banks and state-owned funds that have been financing the initiatives. I doubt that it will be possible for China to finance it all by themselves at the end of the day. And it also seems now that there's an opening to invite more types of financing, to work through co-financing deals, perhaps with multilateral institutions, or even invite private investors in. There seems to be an opening towards that, but I think we will see what will happen. One point that has been raised concerns the environment and the environmental sustainability of far more infrastructure projects. That has been discussed widely, and the latest initiatives now from the Chinese government has been to point out that all projects will be environmentally sustainable, and that this will be clean and green as well. And it remains to be seen, of course, how this can be done. But that's one of the main issues that has been raised, because we are talking about a lot of new roads and ports that will pass through regions that may not have had a lot of traffic before. So of course we will see an increased flow of traffic resulting from this. And in terms of energy, that also raises the questions, what are the power plants that will be established? Will we see coal-fired plants being financed under this initiative? That raises the concerns about pollution, and how these effects will be dealt with. It's an ongoing discussion so far. In terms of transparency, there were a lot of unclear, there was a lack of clarity, I should say, when this project was first launched, when it was called One Belt, One Road. It was launched and questions were asked about what is this project, because typically when something as this is launched, you expect to see a document that elaborates on the strategy, the thinking behind this. This is what we're going to do, this is the time period, this is how we'll finance it. And there was really nothing like that in the beginning. And then more and more information has been provided and strategy documents have been presented. So there has been a change in much more transparency about the objectives of BRI. And there's much more data available today than when I first started looking at this a few years ago, in terms of what are the projects that are counted as BRI projects and how large are they in terms of financing and what will they do. I think it was interesting, the forum and the outcome of that, because I think it showed that the Chinese authorities have listened to a lot of the concerns that have been raised. They are much more open to dialogue. They're responding to the concerns about environmental impact. They emphasized again that this is really the reciprocity that they expect in these projects, that trade is good for both parties, that this is something that is not a Chinese project only. Other countries are invited in to participate, and they seem to discuss the criticism that has been raised in various fora, much more open to that. And I also sense that they talked a lot more about bringing other countries into financing in a way that hasn't been as clear before.